The kiss that saved EarthA. Humans are special. The first time Leora saw Earth, it was through a viewport freckled with frost and ash dot. Her ship drifted in the lee of the moon like a wounded swan, hull still scorched from the gauntlet of warning shots that ringed the planet. Below, blue and white turned slowly, stubbornly alive. The planet did not know her name. It did not know that another fleet, one that did not miss, had already set a timer on its heart. Leora pressed her palm to the glass. Bioluminescent threads pulsed faintly under the pale skin of her hand, a soft tide of silver light that betrayed the Alanthe emotion. She hadn't yet learned to hide among humans. Fear, Ambassador. The human aide at her shoulder asked gently. We're ready. She straightened, smoothing the ceremonial mantle across the ridge of her collarbones. Alanthe Couture was a river of luminous silk that whispered when it moved. It made her feel like a queen. It also made her feel like a fraud. Take me to him, Leora said. To him, the human they had given her as a partner, as a shield, as a bet against extinction. The human who would smile with his mouth and eyes and somehow mean both. The human she had been told she must love or pretend to in front of a galaxy that had forgotten what the word meant. Ambassador. Orion Hale waited in the docking bay as if it were his kitchen and someone had just knocked. He was taller than she expected, but not imposing. His suit was rumpled in a way that suggested deliberation and exhaustion. His hair refused to obey gravity. His eyes were a slow, warm brown, like trees reflected in river water. He bowed just enough to honor her rank without pretending to be Alanthe. Leora, Orion, she answered, carefully shaping the syllables. Human names were simple. Humans were not. He watched her watching the bay, how the steel ribs arched like a rib cage, how the Earth flag hung, the blue and green and white, with the thin line that meant rivers and the circle that meant home. You came fast, he said, faster than the Comes predicted. The conclave changed the schedule, Leora said, and felt the biolight in her throat flare briefly. The Alanthe tell she had not yet learnt to mask. She forced it back down. They moved the council vote. They will sanction sterilization if the signals do not satisfy their directive. Signals, Orion said, as if the word were a bruise. You mean images and gestures and metrics that pretend to be mercy. Evidence of cosentient alignment, Leora said. They call it proof. And if we don't give them a proof they like, he said, they scrub the world. Leora nodded, without rage, without joy. A machine keeps time. Orion's jaw clenched, and Leora watched the muscles jump under his skin, fascinated by how human faces made maps out of feeling. All right, he said. Then we show them something no machine can fake. She wanted to say, you cannot fake a species. You cannot compress 10,000 messy years into a gesture. You cannot tell them we are worthy when they would prefer a world that never asks to be loved. Instead, she said, what did you have in mind? Dinner, he said. They ate under glass where the station's horticulture dome pretended at Earth. Mint and tomato threaded the air. Basil leaned its elbows on the edges of the planters. Orion cooked like it was a treaty. He pinched salt. He adjusted heat. He tasted, always tasting, as if the world might be saved by getting the stew right. You don't trust replicators, Leora observed. I don't trust shortcuts, he said, especially the kind that taste like them. She watched the way steam curled from the ladle, the way the human notion of hospitality made a crown out of someone else's hunger. She set a small Alanthe vial by his elbow. In my culture, she said, we add resonance to food urn infusion of lumens from our own biosignature, a trace of self. It is a gift and a risk. Orion turned the vial in his fingers. The liquid inside glowed a faint blue-white like moonlit veins. Risk, you know how our bodies speak, Leora said. The light is a language, but it carries the scent of what we are. To share it is to be vulnerable. He did not open it. He poured the stew into bowls and set one in front of her, then himself. He ate first an old human trick Leora had learned about in briefings, a way to say this food will not harm you. The wordless promise worked anyway. She dipped her spoon. The stew was imperfect and honest. She let the biolite in her sternum warm and climb, a visible sigh across her skin. It is good. Good is a word we taught to fight alone, he said. You can ride a long way on it. They ate. They talked. Leora told him about the Alanthi homeworld, its violet fogs, the way crystals sung if you pressed your ear to their bones. Orion told her about rain that smelled like concrete and the long flat hush of wheat, about old songs that came back to you in the shower and made you cry 20 years too late. When they were done, he took the vial she had given him and unclasped the silver ring from his finger. He slipped the vial into the ring's hollow, an empty place where human engineers had once hidden a chip and poets had long since hidden superstition. He closed the ring and slid it back on. You don't drink it? She asked, startled. I wear it, he said. If we're going to fake a marriage for the cameras, let me carry something true. It is not a marriage, she said, even though the conclave would have called it one. The word stripped of everything the Alanthi meant and the humans meant and stitched back together with policy thread. His mouth did the human thing it did when denial had been noted and tacitly agreed to. Right, he said, not a marriage. He stood and unlocked a small drawer, lifting out a dark velvet case. He flipped it open to thin bands of translucent crystal, faintly humming with stored power. These are the Concord bands, he said. The conclave insisted, if we perform the rite, she finished. The word tasted like iron. If we do the thing, they will call proof. He nodded. They will watch, she said. All the way down. They're already watching, he said quietly. They were, of course. Every lens the conclave could afford, every relay humanity could salvage, every eye in 1,000 drab living rooms where people had learned to pretend hope didn't ask much of you. Leora lifted one band. It sang the way pure things do when they are still a little afraid of the world. Orion lifted the other. He held out his hand. Shall we? He said. Tomorrow, she said, on the surface, with the sky where it belongs. He nodded, and for the first time since she had met him, something like relief crossed his face. Earth smelled like afterdash, the dash storm. They stood on a pad at the edge of old New Delhi, where the Yamuna gleamed like a ribbon under a sky scrubbed blue by a recent rain. The city was a patient palimpsestrans, under glass, under steel, under vines. A boy on a bicycle rode past the cordon and was gently directed back by a soldier who looked like he wanted to let him through. The Concord dais waited like a sacrificial altar that had learned manners, smooth and wide steps leading up, a spine of antennae that would drink whatever happened here and tell it to the universe with that peculiar human bravado that says, look at us. Look, look. Leora's heart thumped. Alanthi hearts could do that too. They could dull themselves. They could brighten. Today hers knocked on her ribs as if asking to be let out. Orion offered his hand. She took it. Human skin was strange and wonderful, dry and hot, like a planet. He leaned close. Last chance to run, he murmured, smiling the weaponless smile she had not learned to defend against. I ran here, she said. They climbed. The conclave feed painted their faces on 10,000 screens. In a far hall, on a far station, a jury of species that had forgotten how to laugh sat as still as winter. The officiant, an old woman with a voice like rope, spoke simply. The right of concord recognizes not just law, but willingness. 2 delegates of 2 peoples choose to enmesh risk. Do you accept this? Orion's voice did not shake. I accept. Leora forced air into her lungs. I accept. Then, the officiant said, with all the solemnity of someone reading instructions on a box that had saved her life before, join. The bands in their hands warmed. Leora held hers under Orion's palm and let the bioluminescence that sat under her skin rise. A tide, a confession. The band drank it and sang. Orion's band woke in answer, sensing the Alanthe signature hidden in the ring on his finger and the human signature racing in his blood. The dais chimed harmonic approval. The officiant's voice softened and still. She meant the kiss. It was a relic from an older concord where Alanthe did not join themselves to anyone, where humans did not join themselves to aliens, where love did not stand up in public and say, look at this. It had been a symbol then. The conclave had made it a metric. Leora had trained for this, in a room with a tutor who was kind and professional and had never been kissed in her life. Leora's mouth had found no secrets in the practice. It had found obligation. Orion had trained with an ethics officer who had signed a form that said what Orion did after would be his fault. They turned to each other, not practiced, not professional. They had eaten and talked and watched rain. They had put off this moment until the sky was right. Now there was nowhere left to go. The Concord dais hummed gently, hungry. Orion lifted his hand to her face, and the breath that came out of the crowd sounded like wind moving through wheat. He did not grab. He did not insist. He simply set his palm against the cool flare of her cheek and waited. What if it doesn't work? She whispered, and hated that she had asked it out loud. Then we do it anyway, he said, and make the proof later. She leaned in. The first brush was hardly anything, heat finding cool, softness finding facet. Her light spilled involuntarily, a startled sunrise across her skin. Orion made a small human sound in his throat that she would learn later. Meant oh, the second was longer, intentional. It was not about mouth and mouth. It was about a conversation spoken in molecules, breath exchanged, tongues of 2 species learning what courtesy felt like, teeth almost laughing. Orion kept one hand at her jaw and the other on her back, steadying as if she were a ship in a crosswind. Leora let her light go. It climbed her throat in a river. It poured across her cheeks. It raced under his hand. And then something else happened. Something no conclave metric had prepared to measure. Concord bands are old tech. Old tech is like old gods. It remembers what it was worshipped for, and it tries to do it again. The bands hummed. The dais woke. The antennae trembled. Every sensor in the continent drank this signal and found that the numbers misbehaved. Alanthe, light, and human pulse did not simply coexist. They synchronized. The bioluminescent thread inside Leora's chest began to time its tide to the faint electric rhythm inside Orion's blood. In the ring he wore, the tiny vial of her lumens warmed and sang home. The officiant did not move. The crowd forgot to speak. Somewhere in orbit, a conclave clerk looked at their screen and said, very softly. Oh, because the right had never done this. Not once in 300 timid years of species measuring species. It had created a resonance lock. A lock is the opposite of a weapon. You cannot swing it. You must open it. The broadcast went everywhere. It went into living rooms where people who had signed up to be cynical were now crying. It went into mess halls where people who had always sworn they'd die first were now reconsidering. It went into the sterile clean rooms of the Conclave Eugenics Board and ruined their graph. It went into the fleet that had been given a timer and a target and a script that assumed a world could be silenced nicely. And it found, in the machine that would have set the sterilization wave in motion, a condition it had never been taught. If empathy intensity exceeds threshold, abort. Machines keep time. Sometimes, if you're lucky, humans set the clock. The sterilization command stuttered. It requested confirmation. It requested a supervisor. It requested a miracle. The conclave's senior adjudicator looked at the metric climbing and, for the first time since he had taken his chair, smiled. He said, "We have proof." That night, Earth slept. Not because it was safe. Safety was another story. But because the world had a stay of execution and had learned to count blessings as well as bodies. Leora stood on the balcony of the embassy that had been built out of an old museum and a new hope. The Yamuna slid past, stubbornly reflecting stars. Orion joined her, carrying 2 mugs of the bitter black thing he called coffee. He held one out. She took it, and he leaned his elbows on the rail in a human attitude of speculative triumph. "Do you think it was the kiss?" he asked. "There were other proofs," she said, then admitted, "but the kiss was the bright one." He grinned. "Bright, I'll take it." She sipped and tried not to shiver. The heat was a relief and an assault. "Does it always taste like this? Like burnt honesty?" "Yes," he said. "It grows on you." "Some things should not grow," she said. "Some things surprise you," he said. They stood in companionable silence, as if they had known each other long enough to honor a quiet. The embassy garden hummed with small local insects that did not care about the fate of civilizations, as long as pollen made its appointments. Somewhere a siren wound down, embarrassed to be awake. "I did not expect it to feel like that," Leora said at last. "The coffee?" Orion asked. "The kiss," she said. The light on her throat betrayed her, warm as a blush. He turned his head, and for the first time since the cameras had gone to sleep, he let himself look at her. "Me either," he said. "I've kissed for worse reasons. I've kissed for better ones. I've never kissed for a planet." She made the small Alanthe sound that sat halfway between laughter and grief. Is this what humans mean when they say something is ridiculous and holy at once? "Close enough," he said. They were quiet again until the city's humidity settled on their skin like a superstition. Leora set her mug down. "The conclave will call for a full treaty now. They will ask us to tour to prove the proof again and again until it breaks. Asterisk will bring chapstick," he said. "And what will we bring when they ask us to be more than diplomats?" She said softly. He didn't pretend not to understand. "What do you want to bring?" Leora looked down at her own hands, at the faint, soft stutter of light that had found a new beat in her blood. "I want to bring what we faked," she said. Then, before she could regret it, "No, I want to bring what we found." Orion set his mug down and turned fully toward her. There was nothing on his face that made her feel like a tool. There was nothing that made her feel like a queen. There was a man and a choice, and a world that had nearly gone away. Then we bring that, he said. Will it be enough? She asked, for them. He said, maybe, for us. We'll have to keep making it. She nodded. I would like to try. He held out his hand again, because for humans, love was often the same gesture as treaties. Palms offered, risks shared. She took it. It fit as if he had been practicing on prayer. He leaned closer, and she met him, and the second kiss was not a metric. It was not a broadcast. It was simple, brief, and private. A small flame in a big dark. Stubborn and sufficient. Months tumbled into tours. Mars, domes, and Alanthe coral archives. Free cities in the belt that brewed beer like religion and sang work songs in halls of steel. The conclave made them talk. They talked. The conclave asked them to do the right again. They did it when it mattered and refused when it did not. In refusing, they taught the conclave that proof is a thing that starves when fed too often. And still there were threats. There were men who called Orion traitor and women who called Leora invader. There were Alanthe who lit their skin cold blue in the old. Insult pattern and human mobs that painted old dead slogans on new living walls. Every time, the two of them went to those places without a stage and asked to eat with people who hated them. Sometimes the stew changed minds. Sometimes it did not. They kept cooking anyway. On a spring evening heavy with jasmine and concrete dust, Leora and Orion stood again over the Yamuna, where the river bent like a sentence, trying to find the right word. He had a sprig of basil in his pocket. She had a chip of singing crystal braided into her hair. The treaty had words now more than either of them wanted, fewer than the world deserved. The fleet that had watched its timer stall had docked and come aboard as guests. Do you ever get tired of being a symbol? Orion asked. Yes, she said. Do you ever get tired of being a person? Constantly, he said. She smiled. The light along her collarbone answered, intimate and small, the color of home. We could stop, she said, and do what? He asked. Eat, she said. Sleep. Teach someone else to cook. Sing to the crystals until they answer your name. Kiss when we want to. Kiss when we don't have to. He tilted his head, considering. That last one is the selling point. We would have to find other proofs, she said. Good, he said. I'm tired of the old ones. Leora turned to the river and pressed her palm to the rail. And under her skin the biolite found the human rhythm it had learned. And under his hand the pulse in his wrist found the Alanthe tide it had borrowed. And between them ran a small, stubborn piece. When history wrote it later, it wrote badly. It called it spectacle and luck. It called it inevitable. It called it theatre. But families told each other the right version, the one that mattered, that on a blue day under a rinsed sky, two people stood where they were told to perform and instead did something true. They called it the kiss that saved Earth. Because humans like to put miracles in small boxes so they can carry them. Leora and Orion did not correct them. They were busy opening other locks, and the galaxy, inconveniently, went on. Ships sailed. Cities healed the way skin does when you remember to keep it clean and fed. Old enemies forgot the names of their grievances. New ones invented them. Children learned words none of their grandparents had, and old words learned new work. On some nights, when the city lights blinked like quiet code and the river kept its appointments, the two people whose mouths had been asked to do too much sat with stew and coffee and a crystal that sang only when sung to, and they let the world not need them for a while. On some mornings, they woke to work again. On one afternoon, when the sky wore thunder like a dare, Leora's light pooled bright and steady under Orion's palm, and he laughed, and they kissed for no one at all. The antennae were quiet, the metrics slept. The bands sat in a drawer like old gods off duty. Outside, rain began hard, rinsing particular. It drummed a language Orion had always understood, and Leora had learned as if she had been born to it. The river rose a fraction. The basil left out on the sill rejoiced. The city smelled like honesty and electricity. A message blinked on the desk. Ignored for a rare hour, a note from the conclave adjutant, acknowledging receipt of the latest report and promising that the sterilization protocols would be rewritten provisionally, pending a vote. Machines keep time. People keep each other. The kiss that saved Earth did not save it alone. It opened a door that had been painted shut. The people, clumsy and astonishing, walked through.